The beta for the first Descendant is either rapidly approaching or live by the time you watch this, and with it comes an important choice. Which characters will you spend the time to grind out and unlock? What's up everyone, I'm Livid and welcome to Legacy Gaming. Today we're showcasing all 9 Descendants. We'll talk about their abilities, their playstyle, and their strengths and weaknesses, so you get the most out of your beta time. When you start out in the first Descendant, you'll have to pick between Lepic, Ajax, and Viessa. We'll start there, as this will be your first major long-term decision, so it's very important that you're happy with it. We'll then talk about the other 6, as they can be acquired later via the research vendor. Because they are so time-consuming to acquire and invest in, we wanted to give you an overview of each, including their abilities, strengths and weaknesses, and playstyle within a team. Now, as I said, starters first, unlockable characters after. So let's get into it. One of the first characters players potentially have access to is Lepic. He's easily the most accessible damage-dealing character, as his kit is fashioned around a lot of familiar elements. His first ability, Grenade, is exactly what you think it is, a simple thrown projectile that deals high damage to enemies caught in the blast. What's a little interesting is that you can augment the damage with Lepic's second ability, Power Stream, which increases all attacks, weapons, and abilities by 20% and adds a burn effect to his grenade and arm launcher ability. Power Stream acts as an on-demand buff that lasts for around 7 seconds. Lepic's third ability, Traction Grenade, is definitely his most unique ability. When thrown, it pulls nearby enemies to the epicenter of the blast, taking them out of the fight for a few seconds. This is a great tool in cooperative world content, as you'll often find yourself up against small armies of enemies, and this grenade combos extremely well with other AoE abilities in other kits. Lepic's final active ability is his arm launcher. After a brief delay, his arm becomes a pseudo-rocket launcher that shoots out exploding projectiles. Upon impact, the projectiles also leave behind a warp field that continues to inflict damage on enemies that are within range. Finally, we have Lepic's passive ability, 9 Lives, which allows him to ignore all damage and CC effects upon receiving fatal damage. Obviously, this effect doesn't last forever, and has a massive cooldown, but if you do manage to hide and avoid taking more damage, you'll eventually restore 50% of your HP. Now, like I said before, Lepic is an accessible character with a toolkit that most players can pick up and master with relative ease. Power Stream is really the foundation of his kit, which ties directly into 2 very straightforward abilities, Grenade and Arm Launcher, both of which players will understand after just a few uses. Now, he benefits from mana regeneration and mana siphon, while leaning into skill attack to amp that damage. Now, he's a great AoE damage dealer that provides little but highly effective group utility, and will be a great starter for just about any type of player. The second starting character choice is Viessa, and she's definitely got a more interesting kit than Lepic. Her skills are a much more integral part of her playstyle, so I think she'll resonate with players that are into control and debuffing hordes of enemies. Now, to understand Viessa, we need to start with her passive skill, Ice Sphere. Upon inflicting Stage 2 Ice Shackle on 1 or more enemies, Viessa creates an Ice Sphere that circles around her. Now, Viessa can summon up to 3 Ice Spheres, and these each increase Ice Shackle by 2 stages when Viessa strikes an enemy. Now, Ice Shackle is essentially a passive debuff that enemies can build up. Stage 1 decreases speed by 20% for 5 seconds, Stage 2 is 40% for 5 seconds, Stage 3 is 60% for 5 seconds, and as you might expect, when the enemy receives 4 stacks of Ice Shackle, they become entrapped in a casing of ice, immobilizing them entirely for 8 seconds. Now, every one of Viessa's abilities have something to do with this effect, and it synergizes well with damage buffs that you can slot on runes against frozen enemies. Viessa's first active ability is Ice Beam. Viessa fires a beam of ice that deals damage to the target and explodes, dealing additional damage to any enemy caught in the blast. The ability applies 1 stage of Ice Shackle to the enemy directly hit by the blast, and 2 stages of Ice Shackle to any enemies caught in the blast. Her second ability is Frost Fog. Now, when active, Viessa's movement speed and shield are increased. As Viessa moves, a trail of ice also spawns beneath her for the duration of the ability. Any enemy caught in the effect will take damage and take 2 stages of Ice Shackle immediately. Her third ability is Ice Wave. Viessa lets out a blast of ice in an arc in front of her, dealing damage and applying 2 stages of Ice Shackle to enemies hit. Her final active ability is Blizzard. Now, Viessa summons an icy storm in an AoE a short distance in front of her. Enemies caught in the blast take damage and increase stacks of Ice Shackle. Enemies caught in the inner Blizzard take 3 stages of Ice Shackle, while enemies caught in the expanded Pulse, which happens right at the tail end of the effect, take 4 stages of Ice Shackle. If it's not clear, Viessa has a lot of offensive abilities at her disposal. She's actually well suited for more frontline combat, as her skills all have some form of short-range AoE. Now her defensive ability, Frostfog, is really what solidifies her as an aggressive control class. She can string her abilities together, lay down a hail of bullets, and when things get too hot, pop Ice Fog and gain some shields back while jetting out of the fray with increased speed. You can even use this in an offensive manner, to blanket a whole group of enemies in Stage 2 of Ice Shackle just by running by them. She's definitely got a more interesting kit than Lepic, but the way she's positioned might not resonate with everyone, so realize that taking Viessa often means being right up in the enemy's face. Now I can see a lot of players wanting to play Viessa, especially those that are looking for a faster paced start. Her kit synergizes well with the game's gunplay, making her a great choice for aggressive players that like to push the action and keep things at a breakneck pace while keeping your enemies locked down. Our last starting character choice is Ajax, and his playstyle is drastically different from all other characters. If you're looking for the one true tank of the Descendants, then Ajax has you covered. Now let's start again with his passive, because it informs all of his other abilities. Void Vault allows Ajax to accumulate void energy as he's being hit by enemy projectiles. As void energy increases, Ajax's attack also increases. And once he reaches max void energy, all of Ajax's abilities are able to become enhanced, activating additional properties that make them function just a bit differently at the cost of part of that void energy. Now his first active ability is Reverse Door. Ajax throws down a frontal shield that's durability increases proportional to Ajax's health and defense. When enhanced, this ability also reflects damage back at the attacker, proportional to Ajax's defense. His second ability, Void Walk, allows Ajax to jump into the air and slam down, dealing high damage and stunning enemies caught in the impact. When enhanced, Ajax's max shield strength is increased for a short duration. His third ability, Expulsion, sends out a blast of AoE energy, damaging and knocking back all enemies in a 360-degree field around him. When enhanced, the knockback range is increased even farther. Last up is Ajax's final ability, Hypercube. It's a shield that functions exactly like Reverse Door, but instead of just protecting the front, it creates a dome that protects anyone inside. Think Titan Bubble from Destiny, and it hits that mark. It scales off of Ajax's health and defense, and when enhanced, also reflects damage proportional to his defense. Now, I hope it's been made clear that at this point, Ajax is your defensive choice. While the game doesn't have a typical holy trinity, it's pretty obvious that Ajax provides a lot of tanky value to any team. Now let me tell you, having those shields available during something like the Void Intercept battles was a game changer. He's a really interesting character that gives you a lot of flexibility in both world content and group content. And while his skills don't necessarily deal a whole lot of damage, his passive allows Ajax to make that up by increasing his attack, which of course impacts his gunplay potency. If you lean into increasing his HP and defensive stats, the rest should all fall into place. Having a defensive character that can jump to specific locations, throw down shields, and knock enemies back is widely useful. It's no secret that defensive characters often can't throw up the same big numbers as those focused on damage, but don't discount the value that a character like this brings to the table. Because it's a group game that revolves around 4-player endgame content, I really do think everyone should at least consider leveling up or convincing a friend to level up an Ajax, making him a staple of pretty much any squad. Moving on to our other 6 characters, our next character, Gley, is not only one of the most interesting Descendants to unlock, but also potentially one of the strongest. She's a stance dancer, meaning she fluctuates between 2 different combat modes that impact all of your abilities. As usual, let's begin with her passive, Death Sensor. Now this passive feeds into a special resource called Power of Life. Whenever an enemy is killed by Gley, they drop a life sphere. Now life spheres last for 7 seconds on the field, and while Gley performs well at long ranges, to take advantage of these, you want to be relatively close to the action. Every time a life sphere is picked up, 5% of your max HP will be restored, and grant you 1 power of life, up to a max of 10. Now in addition to also increasing her damage resistance in her standard form, she also receives additional HP recovery both in and out of combat. Her first ability is Berserk, which will allow her to go in and out of her Berserk stance. When in Berserk mode, her long distance weapons attack increases by 15%, and penetration is increased by 45, making her an exceptional long-range damage dealer. This, however, does consume 15% of her max HP on cast each time, and reduces all HP recovery while active by 80%. In order to offset her using HP as a resource, we have her next 2 abilities to talk about. Life Extraction, at the cost of 4 power of life, recovers 20% of your HP for each enemy in an 8-meter radius. In normal mode, this will deal damage and reduce damage inflicted by nearby enemies for 10 seconds. If you're in Berserk mode, this will again deal damage to all enemies, but it will also increase your skill attack by 45% times your max HP divided by your current HP. Then we have Requiem. Now while it does consume 25% of your max HP just to cast, the benefits are substantial. In normal mode, you'll create a 5-meter AoE that recovers 2% of max HP every half second. In Berserk mode, this ability instead creates a 2.5-meter AoE for 5 seconds that negates ammo consumption entirely, which is insane for things like launchers and sniper rifles. Last up is Nosferatu, which can only be used if you have 5 or more Power of Life saved up. Upon cast, it'll consume 15% of your max HP and all owned Power of Life, and load bullets equal to that number into your transformed weapon. Now in normal mode, this weapon will stun any enemy hit by this attack for 5 seconds. If you're in Berserk mode, you'll instead inflict extra damage by 45% of your skill attack. Now if that whole kit sounds interesting, it's honestly because it is. Gley fulfills this strange high damage aggressive role while in her Berserk state, and this pseudo-support defensive role while in her normal state. She's the only character that also has a direct impact on the ammo economy in harder content, and performs well at pretty much any range. If you do plan on building her, you can expect to build into things like HP regen, max HP, physical attack, and crit-based stats. She becomes a super heavy damage dealer if built correctly, and having a character so flexible in a team will likely solidify her in the upper tier list of characters to unlock. Keeping up with this interesting train of characters to play, we have Blair, the pyro-obsessed chef who excels at close-range combat and is incredibly reliant on maintaining uptime on your skills, AoEs of fire called stoves, and the burn status on enemies. We'll start with his incredibly strong passive, Flame Manipulation. Now when attacking enemies inflicted with the burn state, your critical hit damage against those targets is increased by a flat 30%. Additionally, your critical hit chance will increase as well depending on the number of stoves that you currently have out on the battlefield. 5% for 1 stove, 9% for 2, and a huge 14% when your max cap of 3 stoves are active. Now you'll get these stoves on the field through his first ability called Stove On, which contains 3 charges, each with their own separate cooldown. Now here, you'll target an area, emit a flame to deal physical attack and flame attack damage in a 2x2 meter radius, and create a stove at that location. Now each stove burns for 20 seconds and applies the burn effect constantly. Now not only do you want to stagger the casting of your stoves, but it's also key that you don't just let your stove expire, since your second ability, Stove Off, plays directly into this. Every 38 seconds, you can retrieve all stoves currently on the battlefield, up to a max of 3, and restore a portion of your MP for each one absorbed. Additionally, retrieving stoves will increase your defense by 200% for 5 seconds, perfect for being in the heat of the action. His third ability, Flambe, is your standard Fire Mage line of fire ability that emits from his hand for 3.5 seconds. Now enemies within a 1.5 meter radius of the flame's arrival point will take damage and receive the burn effect. Last up is Chef Star. Now this is your quote-unquote ultimate, and has a massive 185 second cooldown. Here you'll lob a massive fireball at a location that explodes and splits into 3 smaller fireballs upon impact. Now these 3 small fireballs will also explode, and each one will create their own stove on the ground. Between Stove On, Chef Star, and Stove Off, you'll be able to potentially juggle 6 stoves over the course of 2 minutes to keep up massive damage buffs, control hordes of enemies, and maintain your mana and defenses. This all leads him to becoming a substantial close quarters DPS class, and benefits massively from ability cooldown, ability duration, and MP regeneration to keep these effects up more consistently. If you're looking for a dot caster that more directly feeds into strong gunplay, then Blair is easily the character for you. Just know, picking him will indirectly limit you from the more long-range weapons most of the time, as you'll need to be close to apply burns via your abilities. Now, I'm sure there are some runes that you can lean into like Flame Spreader that possibly make this work in range, but his true home is right next to the grill. If there's one thing that we've noticed, it's that the community already forming around this game seems to already love Bunny. She's fast, she's unique, she has to be moving pretty much constantly to get her kit to perform at the highest level. Now the reason for this is her passive Dynamo. The further she travels, the more electricity she builds up, a key resource used to cast most of her abilities. Additionally, when your electricity is built up, landing on the ground after a double jump will inflict AoE damage to nearby enemies. Her first skill is Electro Orb, and it summons an Electro Orb that automatically targets the 6 closest enemies within a 12 meter radius, damaging them and inflicting them with the electrocution effect. Her second skill, Joyride, is her bread and butter. Casting this ability will send Bunny into Joyride mode, increasing your move speed by 50%. While active, every meter that you move will charge an additional 2.4% electricity at the cost of draining mana every 0.3 seconds. If you can solve for the mana issue here, you'll have a consistent way of keeping electricity generating at an incredible rate. Now, Pulsar is her third ability, and it costs a hefty amount of electricity to cast. You'll enter into Pulsar mode for 20 seconds. For every 6.9 meters moved, you'll pulse an 8 meter radius with an electric AoE that does extremely high damage. Last up is Circuit Breaker, an ability that seems a little out of place considering you slow to a crawl when casting it. Now here, Bunny fires out an electrified beam to inflict heavy damage that increases in potency the longer it remains active. If you've got max electricity built up by this point, and a strong enemy is in your sights, this ability should take care of them rather quickly. Bunny is easily the go-to nuker class in the game, and because of the way that she functions, you want to be up in the action as much as possible, avoiding most long-distance play. Now, building around physical attack, electric attack, mana sustain, and move speed will set her up for optimal success. Now, if you can maintain her speed and evasive capabilities, her meager defense and HP pool won't ever be an issue, and she'll continue to pump out incredibly high AoE damage as you become a blur to your thankful teammates. Sharen, on the other hand, while also a fellow electric user, is your more concealed ambush assassin class. She is a fantastic, close-range damage dealer, as long as she isn't the one being targeted. Like Bunny, she also applies the electrocution effect through her skills, which is a 3-second dot that scales off both physical attack and electric attack. Her passive, Assassinator, increases your damage by 8% whenever you attack an enemy that isn't targeting you. With that knowledge in mind, we're going to jump to talk about her second ability, because it's key to her passive success. Active Camouflage is exactly what you think it is. Pop this ability and you'll become concealed for 30 seconds or as soon as you perform your next attack. Now, once you exit active camo mode, you'll immediately enter ambush mode. For the next 3 seconds, your next attack is amplified, but you will also reset your active camo if you successfully kill an enemy with that ambush applied ability. Now, circling back, her first ability is Cutoff Beam. It's a wide-sweeping, close-range electric arc attack similar to that of Temporal Slice from the Trickster class in Outriders, that also applies the Electrocute effect. Her third ability, Shock Nuts, launches built-in explosives from her arm that damage and stun enemies within an 8 meter radius of the explosion. Her final ability is Lights Out. Here, you'll target up to 10 enemies within aiming range and let fly a flurry of knives to attack them. Now, these will explode to deal incredible damage and apply the Electrocute effect. Now, it's important to note here that an enemy can't be the target of more than 2 knives, so using the skill on at least 5 enemies or more is your most effective way to utilize the skill. The name of the game with Sharen is to be quick with your actions and draw as little aggro as possible, so she is perfectly suited for team play. You'll utilize your active camo to both approach targets and disengage safely, utilizing your ambush proc to reset your camo cooldown. If you're looking to build her, she strongly benefits from raw physical attack, electric attack, skill cooldown, and skill damage. If you choose the assassin role in every game you play, then Sharen is the Descendant most suited for you. The next Descendant that we need to talk about is Jayber, and if you're all about that support life and setting up turrets, look no further than this character. His passive, Turret Sync, makes it so his attack is increased by 20% as long as both your assault turret and medical turret are present on the battlefield. Now obviously that means we do need to talk about his turrets, but let's jump to another core skill of his first, Multi-Purpose Gun. This will have Jayber switch his weapon to, you guessed it, his 3-shot multi-purpose gun. Now, hitting a normal turret will enhance it for 10 seconds. Hitting an enhanced turret will restore its HP and extend the buff on that turret for another 5 seconds. With this knowledge in mind, his first skill, Assault Turret, summons a turret that auto-targets a single enemy at a time. It lasts for 15 seconds and has HP that scales off of Jayber's max HP. In Enhanced mode, it instead attacks everything within a 6 meter radius at once. Now his second ability, Medical Turret, summons, again you guessed it, a medical turret. Now this lasts for 12 seconds and again scales off his max HP. In normal mode, it taunts enemies and restores HP. If it's enhanced, it also restores mana. Last up is Total Recall, which recalls all summoned turrets and inflicts heavy damage to any nearby enemy. Upon using Total Recall, you'll also enter the Overhaul state for 10 seconds, where any turrets that you summon start in their enhanced state. Jayber is honestly perfect at controlling hordes of enemies and providing valuable HP and mana regeneration buffs to your allies. Juggling your turret cooldowns, your multi-purpose gunshots, and your recall ability can lead Jayber to consistently lock down combat areas for your entire team to safely fall back to. Additionally, he benefits greatly from skill attack, mana cost reduction, ability cooldown, and ability extension investment to ensure his turrets are down for as little duration as possible. Now you should know right away if this character is your playstyle, and if you like sitting a bit away from the action as it comes towards you, that 20% damage buff allows you to output substantial long-range damage to larger threats while your turrets keep you safe. He's a great pick for almost any team composition. Last up, we have Freyna, the quintessential poison dot dealer in the game. Everything she does is designed to just keep spreading poison as quickly as possible, to as many enemies as possible. Now this feeds directly into her passive, Unauthorized Bullet, which gives her a flat 17% damage increase whenever you're attacking enemies poisoned by her abilities. In terms of notable debuffs, she has two. Poison is a physical attack and demonic attack dot that ticks for 10 seconds. Room Zero Trauma, on the other hand, works as a spread mechanic and poisons any enemy within a 4-meter radius of the unit inflicted with this debuff. Her first ability, Venom Baptism, launches a poison projectile at a location that damages and inflicts all targets hit with Room Zero Trauma. Her second ability, Defensive Mechanism, gives her a bit of survivability by significantly increasing her defense by 30% for 10 seconds. Any enemy that attacks you while under this effect also has a 20% chance of being inflicted with Room Zero Trauma. Decompose Poison is her third ability, and that has Freyna cast a Poison Swamp AoE on the ground for 12 seconds. Enemies entering the Poison Swamp are poisoned and take constant ticks of damage and receive the Venom Injected debuff. Venom Injected enemies will leave behind poison footprints that spread poison to any enemy that walks over them. Last up, we have Dead Room. Freyna switches her weapon to the Dead Room machine gun that expires after 10 seconds or once you use up the limited 45 bullets that comes with it. Enemies hit by Dead Room take 200% skill attack damage and get the Room Zero Trauma effect, perfect for spreading poison at long distances to a variety of places. Her skills allow her to play at a medium to close range, but you just need to be mindful of her naturally low HP and defensive stats so as not to bite off more than you can chew. Her kit is fantastic for clearing out massive hordes of enemies on virtually every corner of an encounter space, and benefits from investments in physical attack, demonic attack, poison spread, skill cost reduction, and mana regen. Now this will ensure her dots are up as often as possible, doing the most damage possible. If you're a fan of poison or dot classes, Freyna is a no-brainer pick. She provides valuable ad clear and outputs consistent damage to everything she poisons. I wouldn't say she's the best class out there, and the lack of any utility benefit to your team hurts her ranking a bit in my eyes, but overall, she's a fun class, and I think that's what matters to most players. So there you have it, all 9 characters showcased. While it's impossible to say for certain which of these are the best, given our limited time with the game so far, I think a few standout picks such as Gley, Jayber, Ajax, and Bunny probably bring the most to the table, and are all pretty unique kits. These all take a considerable amount of time to farm up, so hopefully this video steers you in the direction of who you want to research first. Now I hope we did a good job laying them out, so that you have a better understanding of what they each bring to the table. Feel free to leave us a comment on which characters you're eyeing, and if you have any questions, you can always join us on Discord to reach out to our awesome community. My name is Livid, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.